You are now listening to the Going Deep podcast with your hosts, Kevin Massari and Mike Bunt, live from the Cover One Sports Network. Here we go.
Welcome into another edition of the Going Deep podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Massari, here with Mike Bunt, breaking down kickoff. I mean, it's kickoff week, Mike. We got the Colts on hand. Although the team may not be preparing or game planning for the game, they're certainly very interested in how the team will play and a couple of interesting positional battles, as well as a depth chart that was just released, Mike. So lots to break down, but more importantly, how are you doing today?
Doing good, Kevin. Excited to have some preseason football on hand this weekend. It might not be the most thrilling action we'll see of the summer, but just nice to get a little bit more clarity on some of these positional battles that we're watching and get to see these guys hit somebody else that's not Buffalo Bills teammates of theirs.
Yeah, so I guess we'll start there, Mike. What do you anticipate? Do you anticipate lots of threes? What do you anticipate seeing on Saturday afternoon? What do you anticipate seeing in this game? Are you just saying that we're gonna how far do the Bills go into their depth chart?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I think this is a game where you probably should bench your key marquee players.
Yeah.
Lately in the preseason, the Bills have played Josh Allen in the first games. I don't think it's necessary for Josh to be out there on Saturday. I understand why they might give him a series or two with some of the new weapons he has, guys like Dalton Kincaid, Sherfield, Hardy, maybe wanting to give him some reps with Shakir. Do I think that's the most important thing in the world? No, I would value his health more than putting Josh out there to get some reps. You're getting all that practice in training camp. So I don't think it's critical to do that against a defense that's going to be having their backups in, that's not going to have their main guys available. But I do want to see a bunch of the younger guys, like I just said, and the newbies on this team. This is a good opportunity to see Dalton Kincaid at Highmark Stadium for the first time in a preseason contest. I want to see how Osiris Torrance looks, how some of these receivers, like I said, Shakir, Sherfield, Hardy, how does the offensive line look against another team after some struggles during training camp? Same with the defense. How is the defensive line going to look against a different offensive line? So you have the cornerback 2 battle, the middle linebacker battle. There's some exciting, intriguing things going on. So I do think we're going to see starters for a little bit, but I'm hoping not to see guys like Stephon Diggs. I know what we're getting out of him. I don't need to see Tre'Davious White out there on Saturday. That's a good opportunity, I think, to give to the corners in the battle an opportunity to start and see how they perform against each other. So bench some of the marquee guys, but give other guys a chance to step up and see what they do.
Mike, you were there Friday at the red and blue scrimmage. What did you get from that? I know you were there with Ant. Break down what you saw, what you liked, what you didn't like. That was really only a few days ago. It wasn't that long ago. So tell us just briefly. I know there's been a lot of articles and reports on it. What did you like? What did you see that came out of that? Just tell us what you got from Friday.
Yeah, Friday was kind of sloppy, in my opinion. I know we call it a scrimmage. It really didn't give off a scrimmage vibe. There's some segments, but it wasn't a traditional letting them move up and down the field and place the ball where the play was finished. I thought it was one of those practices where they focused a lot on the run game, the offensive line, short yardage distance situations, red zone inside the 5. For the most part, early on, the defense was having its way. The defensive line, 1, 2s, and 3s were getting pressure. Greg Rousseau was getting to the quarterback. Epineza got to the quarterback. The linebackers looked solid. Tyrell Dodson and Terrell Bernard both looked like they knew what looked like they had the ability to stand up and take over that middle linebacker spot. The corner play was decent, but like I said, not a ton in the passing game overall. There's some drops early. Dalton Kincaid had an uncharacteristic drop. Dawson Knox had one go through his hands. Gabe Davis, everybody was pointing out his drop, which not going to make a big deal about after the start to training camp, where he actually has played pretty well so far this summer. And then besides, I guess, the slow start to the offense, Kyle Allen was a little bit of a concern at backup quarterback. I don't think it's a huge deal. I know some people are making a big deal about QB number 2 after all the fumbles and bot snaps. At the end of the day, if the Bills are playing a backup quarterback, they're not going to be in a good position regardless of who that guy is. And then my third and final takeaway, outside of the defense being great, was that the offense finally found it in the red zone. Late, you had Sherfield bring one down for a touchdown. Shakir had a nice touchdown. The running game did figure out a few things, but it was just one of those where not a ton to take away from. Nice for the fans to be able to be at Highmark Stadium, get over 35,000 in attendance, but not a memorable evening overall, aside from basically having Bills Mafia back at the Ralph.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that I think that they take too much out of. Honestly, I know we're thinking of like who's playing ones, who's playing twos, who's doing what, who's this, who's that. This is not utilized very much for it's not utilized a ton for where people land on the depth chart. It really isn't. It's more for the fans of Buffalo. Obviously, they go away to Rochester. There's still plenty of people here locally in Buffalo that would like to see the team. You know, just a quick drive to the stadium, park their car, general admission seating to see the team. That's pretty much what it is. And then they basically get to see an organized team drill for the most part. So I don't think you take away too much from QB2. Now, what I didn't want to say about QB2 is if that's the talking point, training camp's going pretty well. If you're talking about QB2, I guess a little bit about some positions people are wondering about, middle linebacker, right tackle, but realistically, if what we're focusing on is Kyle Allen's snap exchange with Mitch Morse, we're in pretty good shape for the season. We really are. And I think that's a good talking point that I had pigeonholed for today was quarterback 2. How much do we really get? I mean, it is the talking point right now. And it's to the point where it's being asked to the head coach and as well as to the entire staff. How much do we care about quarterback 2? Is it something to where what's the marginal difference between Kyle Allen, Matt Barkley, Case Keenum, and then maybe, I guess, Mitch Trubisky, I guess Tyrod Taylor, Blaine Gabbert. I mean, it doesn't really matter, Trevor Siemian, which player you'd like to select. Is there a marginal difference between that worth spending cap money, worth spending a draft pick? I mean, at what point is it like if he's out 5 games, you got to tread water to try to go 3-2 anyways? Is there that big of a difference to where Case Keenum could do something that Kyle Allen can't? I mean, you see Josh Allen thread the needle, make plays. He's going on all cylinders. And then you plug in Kyle Allen. Is it going to look the same at this point especially? No, it's not. So I guess the expectation, it's kind of like that Gabe Davis debate last year. Like, what were you expecting? And that kind of is what, plays the role here. I think our hurt Josh Allen against Minnesota, and which one game where they should have won, was probably still a better outcome than what Case Keenum would have done in that game, Mike. So where do you stand on the QB2 debate? If there's someone cut, 1,200 players are going to get cut in on this show. We'll be discussing it live in a few weeks for our cut down show. But realistically, Mike, is there, outside of a name that could make a difference that would come here on a veteran salary, is there anything you're worried about here?
Not overall, because if we're being real, what is the big difference between a Case Keenum and a Kyle Allen and a Mitch Trubisky? At the end of the day, they're all backup quarterbacks. And when we've seen them in limited action in the NFL, none of them have ever really blown me away. Yes, Case Keenum has had a good season once with the Minnesota Vikings years ago. Mitch Trubisky had a good season with the Chicago Bears years ago. And Kyle Allen, for all we're bashing him right now, has had an okay season with the Carolina Panthers years ago. These guys are all backups because they couldn't cut it as starting quarterbacks in the NFL. And the truth of it is, I know I always say, well, if Josh Allen's hurt for a significant amount of time, it doesn't matter. And people will counter that by saying, well, you need to have somebody to get you by. The way this team is built offensively and defensively, the reason it doesn't matter who the backup quarterback is because they needed to fill other holes on their roster. So the money that could have gone to a better backup quarterback was put to helping fill the depth roles throughout this team. And I would rather have that filled than have a marginally better backup quarterback that may or may not need to actually play games this season. And when it comes down to it, regardless of who your backup quarterback is, if Josh is out, the Bills are going to be in trouble, and they will need their defense to help win them games. It doesn't matter if it was Kyle Allen or Mitch Trubisky or Case Keenum. If any of them were starting games for the Bills, they would change this offense around in a second from a pass-heavy offense to a more run-based, let the clock run, and hope your defense holds a team under 20 points type a game plan. So in the end, I don't think that's really enough to justify spending significant money into a better backup overall. So yes, Allen is a decrease. He is a step down from what they've had. But I don't think you're looking at a bottom 5, bottom 10 backup. I think you're looking at a middle of the pack backup who's just off to a slow start with his new team.
Yeah, I mean, 2 for $7 million pretty much for Case Keenum. They didn't want to match that. They had no interest in matching that. Tyrod Taylor makes $5.5 million. You know, these veteran quarterbacks that have done something in the league are not going to sniff around for much less than that with the injury risk. I mean, a guy that I think could have came in and been all right, but he's had his struggles, you know, on and off the field really is Marcus Mariota. I thought that he could be a seamless transition from Josh Allen. Obviously, you know, no one's Josh Allen, but he's a guy that could come in and do what's necessary if needed. But even he signed a 1-year, $5 million deal in which Philadelphia had to void year out 4 extra years. So that's how people were getting around to paying some of these quarterbacks. I just don't think the Bills would have rather void yeared Leonard Floyd. They wanted to get a deal done with Taylor Rapp. They wanted to get a deal done with Poona Ford. Do you trade those guys for an insurance policy at quarterback? You do not. The Bills did that a couple years ago and said, maybe if I had Leonard Floyd and Poona Ford instead of Case Keenum, maybe that would have been better for my team down the stretch than having an insurance policy that you may or may not need. And then how much better is that insurance policy than Kyle Allen? That's the other question. I don't know. I don't believe that much. So is it enough to amount into an extra win? I don't think so. So that's the decision I had to make, Mike.
And Kev, you look at this roster. I'm sorry for cutting you off for a second. It would be one thing if we looked at the skill positions on this team and said the Bills are absolutely loaded with talent. And you look at the offensive line and you say, damn, if they don't have Josh, they could still pound the rock and get 4.5 yards per carry, and they could just run the ball all over teams. But that's not what this type of team is. So when you go from a Josh Allen, who's a freak, who obviously his connection with Stephon Diggs is amazing, and his ability to do things with his legs and really open things up because of his improvising ability, that's one thing, but none of these guys filling in, regardless of even if you get an upper echelon backup quarterback, are going to be able to do the things that Josh Allen does on a weekly basis. So suddenly you put a little bit better backup quarterback, but behind Gabe Davis, a lot of unknowns in the receiving core. You have an offensive line that at best is probably average right now. That's some tough ingredients for a backup quarterback, regardless of who you are, to win games. So it would be more important based on what the defense does on a week-to-week basis than what the backup quarterback does. So regardless of who would be the guy, it would be asking a lot for them to produce.
And here we go. Speaking of the players behind Josh Allen, we can see the depth chart up on our screen now. For those listening on demand, we really appreciate you. Please smash the like button. Please leave 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. That means a whole lot to us. We can bring amazing content. And One Pass is out for the year. Check out the new shirt and the new design out for One Pass. You get access to the Slack channel. Really cool stuff that we're doing with One Pass this season. Again, thank you all for your memberships last year. But as you look through the depth chart, Mike, you see some, nothing shocking. They never really are, but you do start to see some slashes. You start to see at the cornerback position, Christian Benford / Kyrie Elam / Dane Jackson. That's pretty interesting to me because they did designate that that's a battle, and that's a battle for cornerback too. So that is there, and they're looking for a selection. I think it's very interesting that Jamarcus Ingram's ahead of, Alex Austin's of the world. He's the guy that they brought in against Miami last year against a really banged up team and played Jalen Waddle fairly well in that game. Behind Taron Johnson is actually Cam Lewis and not Saran Neal. You can't even say there's a veteran thing going on there because that wouldn't make any sense. So that's a pretty interesting note that the first backup nickel is Cam Lewis and not Saran Neal. So I do believe that Cam Lewis is safer on this roster than many believed. Deontay Hardy is the backup, or excuse me, is a starting returner now at both spots with Khalil Shakir and Andy Isabella there as well. So I don't know if you need to roster Andy Isabella with them giving both the return jobs to Deontay Hardy. And then at the receiver position, at the slot, inside, whatever you want to call it right now, is Deontay Hardy versus Khalil Shakir in alphabetical order. I believe the slashes are in alphabetical order. Which is very interesting to me that Trent Sherfield is listed as the top primary backups to Stephon Diggs, which is a big upgrade to the backups they had last year, but still really listed as a backup boundary receiver if anything was to happen. And then obviously Justin Shorter there ahead of those mishmash of veterans like Keyshawn Johnson, Desmond Patton, etc. So that was fairly interesting to see that they had, I would have expected to see Shorter a little bit further down, but by all intents and purposes does look like he is on the roster per the first depth chart, Mike. Really nothing crazy at offensive line. They have Tommy Doyle listed as the first left tackle. We had Tommy on the show. He told us he was willing to play any position, and that's kind of where he's been penciled right now per the depth chart, but can really play anywhere. I think that also has a lot to do with the 6 offensive linemen in a game. If they ever go to certain personnel packages and they need an eligible offensive lineman, that's a Tommy Doyle role. We saw Bobby Hart in it last year when Tommy was hurt. So I think that Tommy will continue to play that role this season. So I do think he's got a chance to get a jersey on game day for certain personnel packages. But you see it live right here. You see Von Miller still listed with the starters. AJ Epinesa, Leonard Floyd with the 2s. As well, which is fairly interesting. And Tim Settle above Poona Ford, which is another pretty interesting note behind Daquan Jones. And then the Cam Lewis, DeMar Hamlin safety combo for the 4th safety. So Cam's not only ahead of Siran Neal, but he is in a battle for the 4th safety role with DeMar Hamlin, which is, puts him fairly on the roster, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to take this off for a second here, but when you look at this roster, there's really not a lot of shockers at this point in time, but Cam Lewis definitely was someone that stood out. I think going into training camp, a lot of people would have him on the outside looking in based on the addition to the roster this offseason. But based on reports, he's played very well, and he's deserving to be in the battle, in the mix with these spots. I would still give DeMar Hamlin the edge at safety, but like you said, back up to Taron Johnson in the nickel corner role. That is a sign that the Bills still see him as a quality depth piece on the squad. And like you said, that he has a solid chance of still making this roster. Poona Ford being listed behind Tim Settle was a little questionable. Now, like these depth charts, that doesn't mean these are the say all that this is going to be what you see in September. But it is interesting that they had Poona Ford listed at 3rd. That was one of the ones that really kind of stood out to me. Cornerback 2, I kind of expected it. It seemed like Dane Jackson, Kyer, Christian Benford. That's all been something that we've been talking about for a couple weeks now. Who is going to separate themselves? Dane Jackson has had the edge so far in training camp, but maybe they want to see what happens during these preseason games to see if someone can separate themselves a little bit and give themselves an edge. The linebacker battle, it seems to still be going on, Kev, between Dodson and Bernard. Dodson was someone that we expected to have the edge early on based on his experience, but Bernard has given him a good fight, and credit to both of them. The way that Bernard has been playing, I was thinking he would have skipped Dodson, but Dodson has stepped up in this camp so far and has played well. So that'll be an interesting one that goes down to the wire. Tommy Doyle being listed at the number 2 left tackle. That's interesting, Kev. A lot of people have forgotten about Tommy Doyle and where he sits with this roster. When we look at the tackles, we obviously talk about Spencer Brown and Shell, and then Quesenberry on the right side. But we forget Tommy Doyle is still battling for a spot on the team. And then wide receiver 3 is been probably the one that stood out the most to me, and you hit on it. We're all talking about Trent Sherfield. There's been a ton of Trent Sherfield talk from OTAs and minicamp all the way to training camp. He's had a tremendous catch yesterday that was getting talked about all over the local news. So the assumption by many has been that Sherfield is essentially the number 3 wide receiver. Granted, are you talking slot? Are you talking putting him in different parts of the field? Whatever. But the fact that he's listed as the backup to Diggs and that Hardy and Shakir are listed as battling for that wide receiver position, that's interesting to me because I don't know whether to just assume that's the way it's going to be or if they don't want to give away anything. Like I'm a little confused because from what I've seen so far at camp and the scrimmage, it feels like Sherfield is the 3rd guy. But this depth chart would seem to indicate that is not the case, which is what I thought going into camp. So I don't know. It might just be one of those things where wide receivers 3, 4, and 5, regardless of what number you technically are all going to have a role in this offense, more so than last year where they didn't really use their depth pieces as much in their offense.
Yeah, a lot of questions and a lot of good commentary going on. But do you think that Saran Neal makes the team? He's always been on my surprise cut list, but he's such a premier special teamer. I'd have to be proof that someone like Shorter, Cam Lewis, and others would be able to step up and take that role. They do save $2.7 million cutting him. That's a fair, sizable amount of money they could work with during the season if they do move on and say they kept somebody else. So it is interesting to see if they were to move away from Saran Neal. I do think he's on the roster, but I don't know. I'm getting more and more like he could be a surprise cut if they like the way a couple other players, Hamlin being one, it's all Cam Lewis, maybe Justin Shorter. They all could have a say in it. I think that Taylor Matakevich plays. I don't think he'll end up on PUP. I think he's premier special teams captain. I think you'll see him shortly. So I don't think that you'll see anybody really on those as of right now. I mean, Naeem Hines, but I don't think you'll see anybody on those reserves list except Von Miller. And we'll see how his rehab goes, but we'll see how many weeks, if any, he will be out as we kind of approach the season here in a month. 3 weeks from today, though, we'll be live here breaking down the roster. We're breaking down our thoughts. 1,200 free agents will be on the market. Will the Bill see 1,200 players and not want to touch one of them? Well, Bean goes either way with that. Sometimes he can't keep his hands off of them, but other times he likes his roster. So we're going to have to see how that all plays out with injury and that many players being on the market all at once. So it's going to be a fun show. So 3 weeks from today, we'll be doing that. Next week, we'll be breaking down the game and what we liked. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more in depth about some of the plays that were made from backups. So we're going to excited for the next couple of weeks of shows, bring on some guests here shortly too, Mike. But my question to you was, Josh Allen's going to play a series. He pretty much has generally, historically, at least a series or a quarter. But I think they'll stay with the series. Which game is he getting the series? Is it this game, knowing that it's longer to the openings day in front of home fans, don't really have to do too much, you're at home in your home facilities, or do you do the same schedule? Usually it's game 2, usually it's game 2 or 3 in years past, but now it's game 2 where he played last year, but that would be on the road, not too far though, right down the road in Pittsburgh. So what do you see? When does Josh and the ones and staff get their series?
So I think he is going to play this weekend. And I think he will play the second game as well. If I was the coach, I wouldn't put him in this weekend because I don't think you really gain much from it. But being the only home preseason game on Kids Day and Josh wanting to, I guess, build up some more rapport with his new weapons, I think that's going to end up giving him probably a series this week. If he goes out, they go on a drive, they move the ball 50, 60 yards. I think that's it. They take him out, and you won't see him until the second preseason game, or maybe he'll play a couple more series. If he goes out the first drive, they go 3 and out. I think they might give him another series just to try to get a couple first downs. But one thing that I am really interested about this offense overall, and it just keeps kind of holding a spot in the back of my head, is if the Bills run as much 12 personnel as I think that they're going to this year or planning on this year, there may be some kinks that they want to work out in the preseason before committing 100% to everything during the regular season. Like, we all know 12 personnel is going to be used quite a bit from this team, but this is quite a bit of a change compared to what their offensive philosophy was last year. It's actually kind of interesting because if you dive into DVOA by formation, the Bills were actually pretty good out of 12 personnel last year. They just rarely ever ran it. It was among the least in the league, but they had a good DVOA when they did run it, which is one of the criticisms that Aaron Schatz has actually had of the Bills offense last year with Ken Dorsey, was that even though they were so successful out of their spread and their three wide formations, Schatz said you should have sprinkled in more 12 and other formations. So when you come to critical moments against better teams like Cincinnati, you have other things that you can turn to rather than just relying on the same thing over and over and over again, because once it doesn't work, you have no fallback options. So I am interested to see how this 12 personnel is going to work, because if there are struggles early on, or if there are complications where it's not running smoothly and they're not flowing like they typically do offensively, are they going to be able to battle through that, knowing it's a 17-game season, we'll eventually find that? Or are they going to quickly resort back to what they know they're good at? So that is one thing I'm interested to see in the preseason, how much they attack teams that way.
Yeah, to your point, I don't think he plays both. I agree with you. I think he plays next week for sure in week 2. Will he play this week? If he does, you're right. It would be a 12 personnel situation. They're handing the ball off, play action, very safe things. He won't be standing back in the pocket doing Josh things very long, especially either with these weeks, but especially if he's playing in 2 games. But you're right. It's conceivable that he's in there to call plays so that, him and Mitch can see formation, can set up Dalton, and can set up, Dawson. Are they going to see Sherfield? So you're not crazy to assume that if they were to do one drive, it would be probably a ton of 12, a ton of running plays just to see how the offensive line does in general. Will Damian Harris play? I know he's a little bit banged up, right? So he's coming in a little bit banged up. I mean, the Bills have been fairly healthy so far. But between Hines and then we'll see, I think, we'll see where Harris is at tomorrow. The running back room got bit up a little bit there. If that was the case, you'd probably see a lot of James Cook week 1 with Latavius Murray sprinkling in behind him as a vet backup and a beast behind him. So will the Bills go and play in the running back market with the 1,200 cuts? Maybe they would if Harris's injury is at all significant, but he's said to be a little bit banged up so far, but I don't know the extent of that. But realistically, there's not a ton else. I mean, we've seen a brace on Deion Dawkins. I wouldn't anticipate seeing him then. I just think with the elbow, I don't know if they're going to press Josh to 2 games. But realistically they could, and it would just be probably frustratingly 7 running plays or as many first downs as they got with maybe a pass sprinkled in. So I don't think you would see anything more than that in either of these games, but maybe they'll go and give him next week to go out and play somewhat real offensive football. We'll kind of have to dive in to see if that's the case, or if they will just be working on a lot of 12 going forward. But yeah, in this specific games, regardless of what's going on in the running back room, I would expect to see a lot of Darrington Evans and a lot of Mims, regardless of how the health of the running back room is or isn't. Will they play Latavius Murray? I wouldn't mind seeing a good chunk of Latavius Murray. Like, yes, you don't want to get him hurt. Bigger back. I don't know how much they're worried about him getting hurt, especially if Cook and Harris aren't playing. I'd like to see a little bit of Latavius Murray and not just all Darrington Evans. I want to see him situationally against even the 2s and the 3s, but we'll see how that plays itself out. Or if we just see only Evans and Mims, which probably will see a lot of those 2 players. See a lot of Quentin Morris, a lot of Jay Sternberger. Those are 2 names I expect to see. I think you'll see a lot of, David Edwards and Greg Manns. I don't know how much they're going to play like Tommy Doyle and Osiris Torrance. So we'll have to kind of see what they do on the O-line, but the O-line is going to be an interesting one to track. Like, how deep do they go there? Are they going to play some of those 6th to 8th offensive linemen, those rostered players, but not starters? I don't think so. But I think that they could realistically give them a lot of reps, just so that they can play with Kyle Allen. So you can get a good grasp on Kyle Allen so that he's not playing with, some of the backup, Nick Broker, Kevin Jarvis, of the world. You kind of want to see what Kyle Allen can. That's going to be the problem with preseason is you're going to see a lot of these backup offensive linemen. And I even like Richard Garage is one of my favorites. But you're going to see a lot of these backup offensive linemen with the twos and with the quarterback. You got to kind of take that with a grain of salt. What kind of weapons will Kyle Allen see playing? I don't think you'll even see a lot of Deontay Hardy, Khalil Shakir. So who's he going to be playing with? I guess you'll see a ton of Justin Shorter, right? Like, would that be your prediction? Who's going to be the weapons?
We saw this happen last year with Case Keenum, where in the first preseason game, wasn't it against the Colts last year? I believe it was against the Colts at home, where he was playing with the second stringers, I believe against the Colts ones, if I'm remembering correctly, and he looked horrible. It was awful. And people were worried about what are we going to do at quarterback too. Then the next game, they had him get some reps with the ones against the Broncos, and then Case Keenum goes right down the field and makes it look easy. So it's important to have context when evaluating a lot of these players and the schemes. Who are they going up against? Who are they playing with? Are they playing with your ones? Are they playing with your twos, your threes? Are they going up against ones or twos? I remember a lot last year. People were very impressed by Isaiah Hodgins. And Grant, I'm not going to go down the whole argument. Should he have played? Should he not have played? Should the Bills have kept him or not? Argument. But one thing that was kind of very telling with what the Bills thought of Isaiah Hodgins last year before he eventually did get waived was that even when he was producing in the preseason, he was doing it with the backup units, and they weren't promoting him past certain guys. And when he finally had a chance to maybe make a bigger name for himself on a higher unit, the production then went away. So I think it was pretty clear based on how they were running the preseason last year that he was padding the stats against the lower end guys, but wasn't doing it as much against the better, higher ranked players he was going up against. So that's one thing that we always have to be careful as fans when watching these preseason games. The actual stats don't matter. It's what are you doing and who you're doing it against.
Right. I think that that's really important. I'd like to see him with some 1B. Like, I don't want to see him with, I don't need to see Diggs. Obviously, I don't need to see, some of the premier top end, but I do want to see him with 1B players. I'd like to see a series with Kyle Allen and Khalil Shakir, Deontay Hardy. I'd like to see him mixed in with the 1B offensive line, even like a little bit, maybe even, Ryan Bates and David Edwards and, a little bit, maybe not Deion Dawkins, but I'd like to see him with a mixture of ones. I want to see what we want to see because it's a talking point. We want to see what this guy can do with the ones, even maybe with Mitch Morse at center. I don't know, but I'd like to see something like that. That's really where the useful snaps come in. Unfortunately, you need Mitch in the game. So we'll see if that at all is a thing, like you said with Case Keenum. We'll see if there's any extra additional reps with this backup quarterback talk that he takes with the one. So that'll be an interesting note to follow in this game, especially if Josh doesn't play. Will they bench all their starters? Will they make Kyle play with the 2A, 2B lineup? Or will they give him a 1B? I hope they go 1B and sit some of the premier players, but still give him a plethora of starting level offensive line players and offensive weapons that will make the team. Maybe you don't need Diggs and Davis, but I'd like to see him with Sherfield. I'd like to see him with Shakir, Hardy, some weapons that will actually, and maybe down to Shorter, will actually potentially make the team. So, and yeah, I mean, it's a good point that especially on August 1st through August 8th, the backup offensive line isn't going to be as good as the backup defensive line, especially this roster that has, Leonard Floyd, Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips, AJ Epinesa, Boogie Bash, and Poona Ford, Shaq Lawson, and those are just your backup level players, technically, when the team's healthy. So those guys are definitely, you're not even talking about Greg Rousseau's and Ed Olivers and Daquan Jones. You're talking about, Von Miller, and you're talking about essentially the twos of the roster. And yes, I do believe that that's going to be better than Greg Mann's, unfortunately, going forward. So it's going to be a pretty interesting conundrum that the Bills have to face with these reps. Which starters are important to making sure no one gets hurt? I think everybody should be in games. I don't think it hurts you, minus obviously, Josh, very limited, and I don't think he needs Stephon Diggs at all. So beside the Josh drive. So that's probably where I stand on it. I stand on playing your players minus your top 5 guys You can take it to top 10, that's fine, but I don't really like to see it much beyond that. As you got to go out there and play football, and I don't think you're going to get hurt on the one series you played, in my opinion. Mike, is that where you stand? Are you like rest everybody? Where are you standing on? I'm at about the 5 to 10 mark. Rest your top 5 to 10. Where do you stand with who to rest?
I'm kind of with you. If you got a superstar like Diggs, even if Von was healthy and didn't come off an ACL injury, I'd be telling you rest guys like Von, Diggs, Micah, Jordan Poyer. Those guys don't need to play. You know what you're getting from them.
Matt Milano, yeah.
There's no it's not worth the risk having those guys out there, especially when you have some battles going on. If you have Jamar and Cam battling it out for the fourth safety position, put them both out there at one point, see who can step up. And so I want to see some starters out there. It is helpful for certain players to get reps. And normally I'd be on the side, you don't need Josh out there, but I understand the way the Bills operate, the way Josh operates. He normally wants to be out there and getting his reps. So even though I would love the Brady treatment for him and just tell him to rest up until the regular season, I understand that's not likely to be the way the Bills move forward with it. As long as he's smart out there, doesn't take any unnecessary hits, throws the ball away. Like you don't need Josh scrambling for yardage in the preseason. If you take the snap and there's no one open, just throw it away. And as long as Josh is aware of that and doesn't do anything uncharacteristic or not smart, I'm okay with him being out there.
I think you'll see a lot of Anthony Richardson. I think you will. I think that's where these guys earn it and show that they can be quarterback one. You can't take the injury risk with these guys. You might know what you have in Gardner Minshew. Does that mean he'll play a lot? Will they play a lot of Sam Ehlinger? I'm not sure what they'll do with like Gardner Minshew. But I think in terms of AR-15, I think you want to see him play a fair amount of snaps. I mean, I think that's where these guys develop. I don't think you behoove your team to not play him at all. Especially when you can protect a quarterback specifically. He doesn't need to stay in the pocket. He can kneel, he can throw it away. It's not that important. I think
he's the most intriguing player in this game. Like this,
yeah, by far. Maybe in the preseason.
Yeah, if you're tuning into this Colts Bills game and you're not a Bills fan, you're a fan of any other team in the NFL, or you're a football fan, you're tuning in to see Anthony Richardson, who might be probably one of the most similar players to what Josh Allen was coming out of college in a while. You're looking at a guy that is a ball of clay, who is one of the most athletic quarterbacks we've seen coming out of the draft, maybe ever, Kev. And in saying that, had very limited production while at Florida. And this wasn't a Florida team that had a dynamic passing attack when he was there. This was not a really good Gators team coming out of the SEC. He got drafted in the top 5 because of his raw ability and athleticism of what he brings to the table. Just like Josh, where you're hoping if we can coach this guy up, who knows what his ceiling can be. So it'll be interesting to see how he comes out and performs in this first preseason game, because Colts fans are very much in a place where the Bills fans were back in 2018, hoping that their top 10 pick quarterback will eventually pan out and change the direction of their franchise. One that has taken a lot of weird shots on older veteran quarterbacks in the last 5 years.
Yeah, it's weirdly they've pretty much tried them all out. One of them being still available that I've seen pop up a little bit in Carson Wentz of being a backup. I wouldn't hate him. I think that's be a perfect situation if Carson. I can't believe he's not a backup. That would be what I would think would happen there. But I would like to see a lot of Anthony Richardson. If I was a Colt on the Colt side of this, I think that this is the game you want him playing in. So we'll see what that means, or if how much but they also need Gardner Minshew getting some reps. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be all Sam Ehlinger. I don't know exactly what they're thinking, but I would certainly play Richardson.
I'd give him at least a quarter and a half, Kev.
Yeah.
You want him to be your starter. I have nothing against the Colts even playing him the entire first half and then splitting the second half with Minshew and Sam Ehlinger, because you're putting this young rookie quarterback who didn't even really get the amount of time that he probably needed in college into a situation where he's expected to be your starter right away. He needs these reps. And the difference between a Josh Allen getting hurt and Anthony Richardson getting hurt is if Josh gets hurt, the entire Bills season is thrown away. You go from Super Bowl contender to being a team that's likely going to struggle to even be around 500. But if you're the Colts, you have no expectations coming in. And an argument could be made that Richardson could learn just as much off the field as on the field. Obviously, he's going to go through his punches early on, be on the field, and get the starter role. But if something were to happen to him, or if he came out in the preseason and it was just clear he wasn't ready yet, you could put a guy like Gardner Minshew in and know that probably at the beginning of the year, you probably have a better quarterback actually playing at that time. Or Sam Ehlinger, who, even though he hasn't really proven it, does have some starting experience, and you could get by for a few games until one of the other guys needed to take over.
Question for you, Mike. Here's a good question that I was thinking about. The team will obviously look at their opponents and who they're playing against and players on that team. It's just common knowledge. It's actually why the Bills or other teams don't like scrimmaging, because you get a good gauge and notes and player personnel on the team you're playing to claim their players. So we talked a lot about quarterback, and just because the Bills, nothing more than the Bills are playing the Colts this weekend, I wouldn't envision anything going with Gardner Minshew. But when it comes to Sam Ehlinger, would you sign him? That's what I mean. That would be a potential player that could hit the waiver wire in the 1,200 players. Is that that's what I mean. Is that an upgrade to you over? And I'm not saying this because I know the answer. Yeah. Is that an upgrade over Kyle Allen? That's the kind of decision you would need to make as a Bill scouting personnel. And maybe the answer is yes, he's younger, might have some more upside. Where do you stand on that? That's who the Bills would be looking at.
So that's a tough one, because Sam Ehlinger really didn't show a ton when he was starting for the Colts, in my opinion. And there's a reason why he's now the third string quarterback in Indy. They tried to give him a chance, and he didn't step up to the challenge. Now, there's a lot of things going against him when he earned that opportunity, but you can make an argument either way. Kyle Allen did get an opportunity early in his career to start games and did have some modest success. Now, he really hasn't had extensive opportunities over the last 3-4 years. So did Kyle Allen did he regress during those years? Is he worse than what he was 2, 3, 4 years ago? Or has he not had the opportunity? Sam Ehlinger, I think it was against the Bills last year. Didn't he have a preseason game where he just lit up? It might have been against the Bills in the preseason. I remember he had an amazing performance 1 August. But I don't think you can say one way or another who's better, Sam Ehlinger or Kyle Allen. What I would say is Kyle Allen has been with the team the entire offseason, has a hold of the Bills playbook, while Sam Ehlinger, if he was to become available at any point, would have to learn the Bills playbook on the fly, and then you would have to assume also is better than Kyle Allen at the same time in order to really make it worthwhile from a Bills perspective. I just think it's one of those where even if he was better, it wouldn't really make sense. I think what they have is what they're going to go into the season with at quarterback.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting debate, because like a Sam Ehlinger can be had at $940K for the year. You can have a couple of years of control. Will the Bills make that decision where they can get him up to speed fairly quickly behind Josh Allen, maybe with Matt Barkley on the practice squad, maybe Kyle Allen on the practice squad? I don't know. But you're right. Kyle Allen was not very good last year. That wasn't his top year, but actually showed some promise early on in his career. I thought he had a pretty interesting start to his 2018, 2019 coming out with Josh in Carolina. He showed that he was a fairly good, usable quarterback. I thought had some moments with the Commanders in 2020, or the football team at the time, in 2020, 2021. fairly playing decent ball. But just last year, the Texans, that bad Texans team between him and Davis Mills, obviously that's the reason he's here on a vet deal, but did show some stuff, especially in that 2019 Panthers season, and was really decent in usable action, 69% completion percentage, that 2020 year with the Commanders. There's stuff there and he's still young. It's not like he's a 36-year-old journeyman. I mean, he's not that much older than Sam Ehlinger. He's 27. Sam Ehlinger's like 24, 25. So like, it's not like a crazy scenario where he's a savvy vet that's been around the block forever, fit style. He's, came out the same draft that Josh did.
And we have to mention obviously defense is normally ahead of offense early on in camp, but it is, I would imagine, for a backup quarterback on a new team, probably a little bit more difficult when the backup defense you're going up against has starting caliber talent scattered throughout, where when Kyle Allen is in the game, he's going up against Kyer Elam and Christian Benford, pair of quality corners that are competing for the number 2 spot on the Bills. You have a defensive line that has guys like Tim Settle, Poona Ford. You have AJ Epineza, Boogie Basham, Shaq Lawson. We can say whatever we want about Boogie and AJ. They're still guys that get snaps in this rotation. So they're going to take advantage of backup offensive linemen, because you really don't have many teams in the NFL that have quality offensive line depth. But you'll have teams that have rotational pieces at defensive end and defensive tackle that you can put in that deserve snaps on good NFL defenses. So it's not like Kyle Allen, when he's going out there, is put in an advantageous position to succeed, especially with some of the players he's out there with. So I want to see what Kyle Allen does during this preseason to see if there is some hope that maybe he's better than what we've seen so far in training camp. I do believe if there's a situation where Kyle Allen is your quarterback, that the Bills could win a game or two. Now, like I said earlier, I'm not expecting the Bills offense to win a game with Kyle Allen by scoring 27, 30 points. It would have to be a 17-14 type game or a 20-17 type game. There's no reason, and I saw the comment from Steve Noble earlier, this Bills defense should still be elite. So there is the possibility that the defense could carry a team like the Bills with a backup quarterback for a series of games and maybe steal a game or two. Is Kyle Allen decent enough to not just give it all away in that type of situation? Is it too much for him to handle? Based on his previous years, his previous experience, I think Kyle Allen is decent enough to where the Bills could get by in a 2-game situation without Josh. Anything longer than that, you're probably talking some trouble.
Yeah, I think that's where I stand on it too. I still like the way that they stockpiled their defense in these situations, to where if you need to use a backup quarterback, I still think Kyle Allen and whoever you think could be out there as his replacement. We use Sam Ehlinger today just because it makes sense. That's who the team plays. Maybe the Colts go with their starting quarterback and only roster 2 players, which would be Gardner Minshew as well. So maybe Richardson and Minshew, and then, someone, he hits the free agency market. That's what I mean on who would be in that 1,200 players. So maybe the team would deem that an upgrade. So I don't know. But Kyle Allen mixed with that's kind of what you're looking at. Would you rather have that and Leonard Floyd and Poona Ford and Taylor Rapp, or would you rather have maybe, I don't even know who you consider, Tyrod, I guess, or
Jacoby Brissett when he was available, somebody like that.
Jacoby Brissett, I guess Marcus Mariota.
Ford, give me Taylor Rapp, give me all those 1.77 stay under the comp formula guys, Damian Harris, Latavius Murray. How many cheap signings did we have this offseason? Yeah. I mean, I know it sounds silly, Kev, but you get one of those slightly better quarterbacks for $5 million or $6 million, you lose out on 1 or 2 of those guys potentially. So, and
you also lose your 3rd round comp pick. They couldn't sign anybody.
Comp pick, which
they couldn't sign anybody.
That's probably even bigger loss when it's all said and done. So who knows if that played a role? But based on what Brandon Beane has said during the offseason about the comp pick, I wouldn't doubt that it played somewhat of a role in his decision making.
Yeah, absolutely did. So Mike, going into this week, are you beside the cliche answer of get healthy, stay healthy, what are you looking forward to the most as football returns to Buffalo on Saturday?
So the first thing, I'm just excited whenever preseason comes back to actually see the Bills back at Highmark Stadium with a full stadium, the energy. I know it's a preseason game. It's not the same as fall football when it matters, but it's just nice to see the pads back on, the jerseys worn, and seeing them go at it. So that's the first and foremost what I'm excited for. But in the preseason, I am always looking forward to watching the youngsters and the newcomers the most. I want to see what this rookie class does on Saturday. I know it's a limited draft class, but I want to see what Dalton Kincaid does. Do they give him a couple series, a couple passes, a couple receptions? And then the younger guys, does Justin Shorter get a couple opportunities to shine through this game? We really haven't seen much from him through camp. Does Osiris Torrance play? Will we see Nick Broker, Alex Austin? How are the guys that are going to be lower on the depth chart? Maybe
no Richard Garage, Mike. No Richard Garage.
Maybe Richard Garage, your guy. So those are guys I'm looking out for. And then obviously I mentioned the newcomers. We're probably not going to see too much Leonard Floyd. We're not going to see some of these newcomers a bunch. But is Taylor Rapp going to be out there on Saturday? I would imagine so. Poona Ford. The new running backs on this squad. I even want to see James Cook if they're going to utilize him much this preseason, because I expect him to have a much larger role in this offense compared to last year. So I want to see, is there guys that are going to step up on this team and take over these spots and really take advantage of their opportunities? Because there was a lot of talk about James Cook going into last year, and it didn't really materialize at any point. And I want to see who are these players that are going to step up. And then also, can the defensive line continue their strong start to camp and do it against an opponent that's not themselves? Because this camp has been as smooth as a training camp can essentially go so far. Like you said earlier in the show, the fact that we're talking about a backup quarterback struggling means that we really don't have many big issues that have caught our eyes so far. But the thing about camp is you often confirm your own biases and preconceived notions. We need to see it against other teams to really confirm what our camp observations are, because sometimes when a D-line is dominating, it's just because your offensive line isn't good, and vice versa. So I'm just excited to see them go up against the Colts, and hopefully they'll put together a good performance this Saturday.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to see what I'd love to see the majority of this team. I don't know if I'll get my wish. I do, like I've always said, I think the safeties have played together for 6 years now. Do they need to be together? No, but I'd like to see Matt Milano. He can sit too. But really, outside of that, Josh and Diggs, like there's my 5. Maybe go to 6 or 7 there. I'd like to see a majority of players get reps. I'd like the idea of having Lewis and Hamlin and Rapp on the field, kind of playing out with the 1s and the 2s, kind of mixing in those players there. I'd like to see a little bit more of this linebacker battle. Will Bernard be on the field with Dodson? Will Bernard be on the field with Dorian Williams, who's said to be picking up at camp right now? So really, I know we're not happy about 2 third-round picks being in the linebacker room, and there's a world where they're both the 2 main backups. But that's really good depth and people that have been learning in the system behind your 2 starting linebackers, which the team just has had no linebacker depth in the history of this team lately, in the recent history of the Bills. So it's really nice to have 2 third-round picks developing behind potentially Dodson. And if he's not good, you can go right away to one or the other based on the scenario, most likely Bernard in this situation. I'd love to see Bernard win it. Dodson on special teams. Dodson as a veteran presence when needing him to come in. But I'd really like to see what this linebacker room looks like. And heck, put out, you don't need to really play Trey. He'd be another one. but put out the corners. Let me see Kyer. Let me see him versus Benford. Let me see a lot of these battles that are happening right now. Dane Jackson, obviously, in there as well. I want to see as many reps from those battles as I can. I don't think we don't need to hold back on those battles.
Well, I have a question for you. Say they sit Trey on Saturday,
which they should.
That I would say is probably one of the most obvious decisions that they have right now.
Yes.
If they start Dane Jackson across from Christian Benford, is that a telltale to you that Kyer is noticeably behind, or would you take anything away from that and have to wait till the next week to see? Do they then?
I probably need one more week before making my opinions, because they could then bench Dane, maybe not even play Dane at all, and play Kyer.
That's what they could do. They could
do that too tomorrow or Saturday.
I know in the past with quarterback, when there's a quarterback battle, they'll give each quarterback that's in the competition a chance to start. Could they do that with corner too, where they give each of those guys their one opportunity?
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting to see how they handle that. They could do the same with linebacker with Bernard and Dodson. And I did see a comment here. Good to see DeMar Hamlin get back. And obviously that's something that a lot of people are going to have their eyes glued on. And it'll be great to see him back on the field and see how things play out with DeMar. It seems like he's in the right spot mentally, and he's ready for this opportunity. And it'll be kind of a relief to finally see him, I guess, get that first hit, get that first tackle, and be able to keep going beyond that and realize he's back on an NFL field. So that's definitely something to keep your eye on. I will say this with linebacker. I'm hoping Bernard wins this job. You talked about it just a minute ago, where adding to this linebacker depth and how some people might be upset taking similar players back-to-back years in the third round. While I do agree they're similar players, I believe that Dorian Williams was selected in the third round specifically because they knew that Bernard was going to have a chance at winning this job, and they needed somebody to take over Bernard's role on this team. So long-term, is Dorian Williams an outside linebacker contributing on special teams? Probably not. He's probably eventually taking over at middle linebacker or adding to the competition. But for now, if they assume that Bernard was going to be going up against Dodson, they needed someone to fill his void. So I all these moves after having an offseason to see the way things are playing out, it makes a lot more sense now what the thinking was all along in putting this team together. And essentially what it is, it's the same team as last year minus Tremaine Edmonds, but with a lot more depth scattered throughout this roster. And I saw some national people recently laughing at some Bills reporters and Bills fans commenting on Twitter that this team is better, because the national narrative is that the Dolphins and the Jets have narrowed the gap and that they're ready to seize the AFC East and take it from Buffalo and win this division and set the Bills to a 9-8 record or a 10-7 record. But my belief, Kevin, we had a show about it a month ago. This Bills team is more talented than any Bills team we've had during the Sean McDermott era, and it is a better team than what they had last year. Doesn't mean the record is going to be as good, because it's hard to replicate a 13-win season. But I do think it's going to be a wake-up call to some people when they start to realize how talented and deep this Bills roster is.
Yeah, I think that the downgrade from Tremaine, just the linebacker swap is from Tremaine Edmonds to Dorian Williams. Everyone else was on the roster. So the downgrade there, but they literally upgraded across the board, most notably at interior offensive line. They've gotten better and deeper at receiver behind Gabe Davis. You actually have a usable Sherfield. You have, this battle between Shakir and Hardy and Shorter. They've gotten better there. They got a premier asset in Dalton Kincaid to run 12 personnel. And Taylor Rapp and Poona Ford and Leonard Floyd, like there is upgrades across the field on a team that lost 3 games by 8 points. So it's very interesting national narrative. And I really think that the linebacker spot, really where you could point to the opening, really the biggest open. Then you have another year of Benford and Elam and Trey White being healthy. All of them were hurt besides Dane Jackson. And Dane Jackson even went off with his scary injury early on in the season. They were all hurt, every single one of them. So believe it or not, as well as the DBs had played last year, they had some, and then obviously Hyde and Poyer, they had some significant injuries at the DB
Dane
spot.
Jackson had one of the scariest injuries of the season that we all forget because it was such a crazy season of injuries. You're not thinking about what happened week 2 Monday Night Football against Tennessee. But I remember being at the stadium at the time when he was taken off the field. People were worried about Dane Jackson, we're wondering if he was going to be able to play football again at that point. Obviously, we all look back to the Damar Hamlin injury because that was one of the scariest things any of us have ever seen in our lives on a football field. But the Bills had quite their share of injuries. Even Micah Hyde, when he was down on the field, the same Monday night game that Dane Jackson went down, Micah Hyde goes down. So it's going to hopefully be a relief if this secondary can play healthy football, because before all the injuries started taking place last year, this really had the makings of a special elite defensive unit. And while they were still very, very good, the number 2, I believe, DVOA defense in the NFL last year, it ended up unraveling a little bit late in the season where the lack of depth, the lack of some of their star players being available made them vulnerable. And when you're going up against Cincinnati, when you're going up against Kansas City and the top offenses in the NFL late in the season without your best guys, you're going to be taken advantage of. And unfortunately, it got to be too much for the Bills to overcome.
Yeah, and that's what's a very interesting conundrum here, that the roster, between getting healthier, which is pretty banged up, and then adding in some influx of talent, it is the best version of this roster that we've seen. I thought they shored up a lot of deficiencies that they had. What will amount from this? I think that Dodson's the first, even if he doesn't win to Bernard, I think he's the first player in regardless, whether it's Bernard or Milano that gets hurt. I think that Dodson would come in to play right away as the third linebacker, Dorian Williams being your 4, maybe AJ Klein being your 5, Spector there too. So I think that's kind of the way that room's going to work itself out. But it's definitely going to be one where we'll have to see. I'd really prefer to see the upside of Terrell Bernard. I just love what he's potentially going to be able to do. Hopefully he's able to hold on. I expect and hope for a big game on Saturday. So Kevin's spotlight of the week is on the linebacker position. We will review that with everybody on Tuesday, Mike, but lots of action-packed stuff that we went over. We're going to have a lot more to go over to talk about this game, what we liked, what we didn't like, what else is going on at camp as camp winds down on Thursday as well from St. John Fisher University in Rochester, New York. So it's going to be great to kind of recap everything there, recap the game, and then look forward to game 2 against the Steelers. If Josh Allen, we might have some say into whether Josh Allen's going to play then or this week as well. So it's going to be a fun. Football is back officially 3 weeks from today. We're going to do the cut down show, the cut down special right here on the Going Deep podcast. We'll review the cuts. We'll review the final roster. And then we will talk about waiver claims that we've seen across the league, if there's any that could help the Bills. And 2 weeks from today, we're going to do our draft, or we're going to do our roster show where Mike and I are going to pick our rosters and go over who we think makes the team and why, and potentially who will win these battles if they're not already decided. So 2 weeks from today, we'll be doing that. As I said, next week we'll review this game and then the Steelers game as well. So we've got a lot of footage and a lot of topics to go over. Please smash that like button for us here on the Going Deep podcast. We have great content coming to you all season long, as well as amazing guests as the crossover shows start here soon. Starts early and often with the Jets and some other great guests that we'll have in September. And then from all the Cover One shows on the podcast and Sports Network here. And One Pass, get out there and give One Pass a try. We continue to bring you some exclusive content through our Slack channels as news and notes and source things that we hear as well. Usually go there as compared to like Twitter. Mike, with all that being said, there's still some rumblings that players might get re-signed, I saw today. So we'll see if any of that comes to fruition as well. Could a Gabe Davis extension be coming? Could that be Taron Johnson? Could that be Micah Hyde? Could that be Daquan Jones? There's some news there that we can track over the next week too, right?
Absolutely. And I'm hoping for a Gabe Davis extension, Kev. You know I'm pro Gabe Davis. I don't want to say too much because the comments always seem to light up whenever I say anything about Gabe Davis. Good or bad, I'll have people attacking me regardless of what stance I take. But I think you and I have discussed it enough in the past. We have an idea of where the money would probably be at. And I know I am for it. I think you're also for it. That'd be something good to have happen. Daquan Jones, would love to have him signed up for another year as well. And who knows, could AJ Epineza be a guy that quietly could be talking contract extension? We talked about how we would probably be patient and wait for it to happen. Behind closed doors, could he be impressing Brandon Beane enough to stay on this team for a little bit longer? So definitely a lot to talk about, and hopefully we'll have some more news prior to the start of the season.
Yeah, exciting. It's exciting time. So we got lots to track between this game, next week's game, our roster show, as well as our cut down show coming, and then hopefully maybe an extension of somebody of some sorts to talk about. Is it Gabe? Is it it's going to be I still trend. Could it be Taron Johnson? What he's been said. There's been a lot of promotion on him. He's been said to be one of the best Bills defenders on the roster. That could come at an interesting time with some form of extension from Taron Johnson. So we're going to see Gabe Davis being the most prominent. AJ Epinesa, a guy that has had a glowing. He went from all offseason. Could he get traded? Could he do this? Could he do that? To being a prominent part of this defense. He's another one that could be there as well. So watch out for AJ Epinesa, Taron Johnson, and Gabe Davis, among others that the Bills could be looking at extending. But smash that like button for me if you wouldn't mind. That means a ton to us here from the Going Deep podcast on the Cover One Podcast Network. Looking forward to bringing on some top guests as well. Will we see producer AJ again? We'll see if we can get time on AJ's calendar. Will we have another producer soon, Mike? I don't know what the future holds.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned to our updates. And as always, we appreciate everybody coming out. But we'll see you guys live here to recap this game and to recap and to talk about the Steelers game as well as what happened in camp right here Tuesdays at 7. But I'm Kevin. That's Mike. We'll check you guys out and we'll see you next week.